Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the strategic planning meeting here in the council chamber on Tuesday the 6th of August. Have we any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. I've apologies from Councillors Foster and Watson.
Foster and Watson. Thank you very much indeed. So the minutes of the previous strategic planning meeting.
Just clarify, Chair, the legal officer was missing off your list of officers on your minutes, but that's the only error I could spot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that one. So those minutes of that strategic planning meeting held on here Tuesday the 4th of June, they've been circulated. Are members happy that these are true and correct record of that meeting? Thank you. With that one amendment, yep. Have any members got any disclosures of interest they wish to declare this afternoon? Yes. Councillor Swinburne.
Thank you, Chair. Item number 5 in 2020, January 2020, I was chairing the Alnwick Town Council planning meeting where we put forward representation with regard to the car park of that application. So I've taken advice from the legal officer and I will withdraw for that item.
Thank you, sir. So just before we get on to determination of planning applications, I'm going to ask Rob Murphy to speak. As some of you know, we've had a change in government and there have been some proposed revisions to planning policy. So I think Rob is going to enlighten us a little with a few words. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. It wasn't so much to enlighten you, more as to lay down a few cautionary notes. Okay. On the 31st of July, government issued a consultation version of the National Planning Policy Framework, which includes a real emphasis on increasing housing delivery rates up and down the country. For context, Northumberland's target at the moment for its housing needs figure is 549, and under the new proposed changes, that would rise to 1,769 per annum. Okay. That represents a step change in a target, but we are delivering at 1,559 per annum at the moment. But I wanted to make it really clear that that is only a consultation document and as such has no weight whatsoever for the matters we're going to be discussing today. So please take out of your mind that either approving or refusing applications will somehow have a bearing on achieving what is a hypothetical target at the moment. Okay? Do you have any questions about that? So what I'm saying is that I'm asking you to attach no weight to that at the moment, rather than a limited weight. Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. As I normally do at the beginning of a strategic planning meeting is just briefly to go through procedure. As chair of planning, I normally introduce the application, ask if you've seen the site visit videos that have been circulated. We then ask our planning officer to present his reports with any changes to recommendations or any updates. We then have a public speaking slot, 5 minutes for objectors, 5 minutes for a local member, parish councillor, county councillor, and then 5 minutes for an applicant or a supporter. We then ask our planning officers, members, put questions to them about the planning application in front of them. We then debate the application, ask for a proposal, someone to second that, and then we debate it and we take a vote with a majority decision. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've got two planning applications before us, and I will begin by introducing the first application. First application is on page 21, and it's an outline planning application for the development of approximately 60 dwellings, including access, open space, SUDs, associated infrastructure, a car park, and a bus terminal stroke stop for Almouth Station, with all matters reserved except for access. And this is at land north of Almouth Station, Lesbury in Northumberland. I'm now going to ask Mr. Tony Lowe to introduce this application. Tony, over to you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I can just direct members to two updates to the report, please. Two updates to the report. In paragraph 4, consultation responses, the LLFA response should read no objection. The position is made clear in paragraph 757 later on in the report, where it refers to the LLFA response. And in paragraph 5, public responses, there are now 111 numbers of objection letters that have been received. Some are from the same addresses throughout the consultations that have taken place. The issues raised in the additional objections echo objections previously received, including policies within the neighbourhood plan, the need for additional car parking, the housing sites outside the settlement boundary, and impact on ecology and landscape. There are also 2 letters of support, again from the same address, and they highlight affordable housing provision and permanent occupancy of the proposed market units. These matters have been addressed in the report, and members have had the opportunity to view all the objection and support letters, and they do not alter the recommendation in any way. Mr. Chairman, if first of all I could take members through some slides on the site. Up at the board, the site is indicated by the area hatched and outlined in red. Curly Lane and Hillside lie to the south and southeast, with the railway line to the west. The A1068 is to the east, with the new access proposed from the junction where Curly Lane meets the A1068. It's a location plan in a drawing format, showing a zoomed up view, if you like, of that boundary line, just to make it a bit clearer. And the air photo of the site is again outlined in red, and this provides a better visual context of the landscape and the residential lines, as well as the railway line and the railway station themselves. The indicative site layout provided by the applicant shows the site would be able to accommodate the proposed development and gives context to the proposed access and roundabout at the junction of Curly Lane A1068, which now is visible in plan form. And again, an indicative site photo, again provided by the applicant, and this provides an improved, hopefully it provides an improved visual context of the proposal, incorporating the landscaping, or the indicative landscaping for the site. Some photos set within the application, as titled. One is set on the A1068 looking south, and then to the right across the northeastern boundary looking west, and the housing you can see in the near distance there, I believe, is the back end of Hillside. Curly Lane Junction, where the new, or in the area of where the new roundabout would be proposed. Again, that's looking towards the site in the open green area as the site begins, as the levels begin to rise and go up. The other photo is at the back of Hillside, the back of Curly Lane, looking again back into the site across what is currently agricultural land, and how it bends down towards the A1068. Internal views from the northern boundary looking west down towards the western boundary with the railway, and the northern boundary looking south. Again, that's taken in from the back of the site, looking across the slope on the A1068 side towards the back of Hillside and Curly Lane. Mr Chairman, the site is set on elevated land to the rear of Curly Lane and Hillside and is currently in agricultural use. As set out in the report, a number of objections have been received, including that the site is outside the settlement boundary, the impact on the character of the village, flood risk concerns, the proposal is contrary to the neighbourhood plan, and the need for additional car parking and loss of green space. Whilst it is acknowledged that the proposal is financially viable, set out with the settlement boundary, the quantum of and type of development for housing and the car parking proposed is not considered to be proven as justified at this time. Whilst the Section 106 agreement has not been provided and signed for the application, the applicant has confirmed a willingness to do so and provide the contributions required. Consultees do not object to the proposal, subject to the conditions that they have recommended. And, as has previously been discussed, it is worth noting that the Government is currently consulting on changes to the NPPF regarding housing and its assessment, and with a view to significantly increase house building in the country. However, it should be noted that currently, based on current figures and requirements, the NCC are approaching about 300% of our housing delivery test. Mr Chairman, the proposal is recommended for refusal, subject to the reasons set out in the report. Mr Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, we now come to the public speaking slots. And in this particular instance, we've got Jenny Ludman, who's going to speak as an objector for the first 5 minutes. And then for the second 5 minutes, she's going to speak on behalf of the Parish Council. And those two slots will be carefully timed. And then, in support of the application, we've got Guy Munden from Northumberland Estates. So, Jenny, over to you. You have 5 minutes speaking as an objector. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Why would we support a planning application that is completely contrary to planning policy? And that's what I'd like to explore with you over the next 5 minutes and then another 5 minutes. I'm speaking on behalf of the Parish Council and residents in 2 separate slots. But I should let you know that I have worked with the Parish Council over a number of years with their neighbourhood plan, so I'm very familiar with the area and with the policies. Obviously, first and foremost, we'd like to endorse the officer's recommendation for refusal. You'll be aware that this application has been in the system now since 2018, a period of over 5 years, and I think it's important to look back and think about the planning context and what that was 5 years ago when this application was first submitted. 5 years ago, there was no up-to-date local plan. The Alnwick local plan was out of date. Lesbury neighbourhood plan was in its infancy. 6 years ago, 5 years ago, there were no settlement boundaries identified. And the council could not demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, something which at the time would have been quite a significant material consideration. So what's different now in 2024? We've got an up-to-date local plan that's only 2 years old. We've got clearly defined settlement boundaries which help us guide development to the right places. We've got a very up-to-date neighbourhood plan, which, by the way, was voted through at referendum, with 92% support from the local community, very strong support. And finally, now in 2024, we have a very healthy housing land supply. In fact, county-wide, my understanding is it's at about 12%, which is more than double that required by government. Even with the changes proposed, with the new methods for calculating housing land supply that Rob alluded to earlier, there can still be no doubt that the current supply is still very healthy. As you're aware, the council identify a housing requirement also for all parishes producing a neighbourhood plan. So what's the housing requirement identified for this parish, for Lesbury? The housing requirement identified for the plan period up to 2036 is for 8 dwellings, not 60 dwellings, 8. And this figure of 8 dwellings can be provided entirely on brownfield sites and infill sites within the settlement boundaries in the parish. Indeed, these settlement boundaries were drawn up with this figure in mind and examined. Now, I just want to be clear, this doesn't mean that the Parish Council and residents don't support the provision of dwellings for affordable housing and for people with a local need. Indeed, there are policies in the neighbourhood plan and the local plan that do support the provision of this kind of housing, but that is not what this application is about. Turning to policies in the plan, as councillors on the Strategic Planning Committee, you'll be very well aware that the law says that planning applications must be determined in accordance with policies set out in the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. That is to say, the development plan is the starting point. Your officer report sets out the relevant policies, of which there are many, but I'd like to focus on policy STP1, which is the strategic policy that explains overall where development should and should not go in the county, and that policy is clear. It does not support housing development in the open countryside, and it does not support housing development outside settlement boundaries, except in some very limited circumstances, which don't apply in this case. It's difficult to see how anyone could in fact argue that this proposal is in accordance with that policy. Indeed, the planning statement that was submitted with the application back in 2018 has not been updated, and I can only assume that this is because the scheme is completely contrary to the current policy context. In fact, a very similar proposal was submitted by the same applicant outside Lesbury in 2020, this time for 40 houses. You may remember it. The application went to appeal, the appeal was dismissed, and the inspector was clear in his decision. This site, again, was outside recently identified settlement boundaries in the neighbourhood plan and in the open countryside. Even though the neighbourhood plan had not at that stage been to referendum, the inspector still gave policies in that plan and the settlement boundaries significant weight. I'm not sure where I am on my timing. 18? Yeah. I'll leave it and wait for the next 5 minutes. Okay? Right, I talked earlier about the Planning Act and that planning proposals must be considered in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. So are there any material considerations that are so significant that it would justify a departure from planning policy? The answer is no. Your officers do not think so, the parish council do not think so, and neither do the residents. The applicants seem to be suggesting that providing a car park of 80 spaces is of such significant benefit that it outweighs the planning policies that clearly seek to prevent development in the open countryside. Not one single resident in that area who supposedly would benefit from this car park supports the application. Not one. So who exactly is the car park benefiting? Since COVID, there's been a significant reduction in train travel to work, and the lack of availability of car parking is not quite the problem it used to be, especially with people working from home more. In fact, surveys have been done by the council and by residents, and these are available on the planning portal pages, and these surveys show that there is capacity at the station car parks. In fact, there appear to have been no days in the last 4 or 5 months that surveys have been taking place when both car parks have been completely full. Even if there were serious capacity issues, there are other options that could be explored for increasing car parking that don't involve building 60 new houses in the countryside. Providing new housing is not a solution for car parking problems. So what other material considerations are there that are so significant that it would justify a departure from planning policy? The applicants are suggesting that the amount of affordable housing provided as part of the development constitutes a significant benefit. When the application was submitted, the affordable housing offered was 20%. This has now changed to 25%, presumably to comply with policy HOU 6, which requires a minimum, and that is a minimum provision of 25%. This is a basic policy requirement, not a benefit. Furthermore, the council has obviously had some doubts, or your officers, because there was an independent report commissioned to assess whether the scheme would be viable with that 20% affordable housing. The study concluded that the scheme was not viable and indeed would only be viable with a lower provision of affordable housing, and that was based on 20%. So there can be no doubt at all that the provision of 25% affordable housing is simply not viable in any case. Now, I've not even begun to mention the other concerns, the traffic and safety implications, the fact that the whole site is allocated as a non-designated heritage asset in the neighbourhood plan, the impacts on wildlife, landscape, the proximity of the AONB and other protected coastal areas, not to mention the impact on the residents on Curly Lane, Hillside and other places nearby. I could go on, but I think it's enough to sum up by saying that this is a totally inappropriate development in this location. It's contrary to planning policy, there are no material considerations that outweigh this, and the residents and the parish council would most strongly urge you to agree with your officer's recommendation and refuse the application. Thank you.
To invite Guy Munden from Northumberland Estates to speak in support of the application for no more than 5 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Good afternoon. I'm speaking in support of the application. As has been alluded to, the application was submitted in 2018, and over the last 6 years it's been subject to numerous rounds of consultation with key stakeholders, and there's consistently been no technical objections, including highways, ecology and flood risk. The only party that does not support the application is Lesbury Parish Council. I agree with planning officers that it is appropriate that this application is heard at Strategic Planning Committee rather than the local area committee. The very nature of the application, providing strategic infrastructure for the entirety of North Northumberland, demonstrates that the planning case goes far beyond the very localised view of the parish. The Parish Council failed to appreciate the key strategic benefits and the wider planning picture. And I'd urge members of this committee to take a strategic view and don't let the very local interests of the Parish Council effectively veto a development that has significant benefits to the wider county. The site is highly sustainable, being centrally located within the settlement cluster of Lesbury, Hipsburn and Almouth. It's located adjacent to an East Coast mainline train station. There's no other available location in this area that is so well connected in transport terms. The site is the gateway to the coast national landscape. The additional car parking facilities will promote sustainable access to the coast and aligns with the National Landscape's own tourism and car parking strategy. The application will facilitate the delivery of 15 new affordable homes, as well as 45 new market homes that will be restricted to permanent residents. Almouth has a soaring number of second homes, currently at 39%. Almouth is also one of the most expensive areas in the entire county and has an affordability crisis. There are no sites suitable within Almouth that could possibly deliver a meaningful number of permanent and affordable homes. The Housing Needs Survey evidences that there's a requirement for 52 affordable homes across Lesbury and Almouth. This application is a well-planned development in a sustainable location and delivers a meaningful number of affordable homes. The only other way of delivering any affordable housing is through piecemeal rural exception sites dotted all across the parish, which would be less well located and provide no planning gain for the community at all. In contrast, this application is well planned and it's able to deliver key strategic transport infrastructure for the benefit of the wider area. There are significant parking issues throughout Hipsburn, with indiscriminate parking on the residential streets and lack of space available in the current station car park. Network Rail are fully supportive of the new car park and have committed to working with the developer once planning is secured to ensure that it's built to their specifications. Access through the station platform to the new car park is achievable, and again, Network Rail and the bus operators are supportive of working with the developer to provide the optimum solution for the connectivity, and that can be secured via planning condition. The position of the parish council is inconsistent. They object to the development, yet the neighbourhood plan itself specifically supports the extension of the car park, citing that 94% of local residents actually support additional car parking spaces. The parish council can't have it both ways. There are simply no other suitable sites in the vicinity of the station to provide these facilities. And I'd also note that the application safeguards land specifically for the development of the Alm Valley Railway, which will obviously also benefit from the proposed car parking facility. Finally, I just reiterate that this development is strategically important for the county, both in terms of housing delivery, enhancement of a key transport hub, encouraging sustainable travel patterns with the proximity of the station, and for supporting sustainable visitor access to the national landscape. And I really would urge members here today to take a strategic view and consider the widening planning gains that this development offers. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the Planning Committee, you now have the opportunity to put questions to our planning officers. Who would like to ask a question to our planning officers this afternoon? Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just cover the policy, because your case is that this is against policy. Could you just clarify if this is a weighing up or this is a clear, just doesn't comply with policy, so therefore you strongly advise us to object? And would, for example, and this isn't on the table, but would, if there was more affordable housing, would that change the weighing up? I'm just trying to get a feel, because it comes down to policy. The case is that this contravenes policy, and it just clarify exactly what the logical, legal conclusion that you've drawn from this, and why you're stating that it's against policy.
Mr. Chairman, it's contrary to STP1. It's set out in the principle of the application. If set outside the settlement boundary, consisting of market dwellings and the car parking, which I set out in the report, I don't think there's a proven justification for both at the quantum that's being proposed. What we would support outside or adjacent to a settlement boundary by policy would be things like a small 100% affordable exception site. We're not being offered that. What we're being offered is a market housing site and a car park site. The market housing site, we're being told, will support the car park and provide the car parking, which we are told is needed. And we need that now. But I've not seen anything, and I can't put my hand on anything and grasp anything and say that the 80 car parking spaces that's being proposed, we actually need them. We might need 100. We might only need 10. And equally, because of that, the quantum of housing that's being proposed in relation to that, I can't put my hand on that and say we require 60 market houses to support that, because we might only require 10, or we might require 100. I can't balance both together, but regardless, they are set out with the settlement boundary and adjacent to it. Now, if we can't justify that, I can't really justify recommending to you that the bus turning route or the bus turning area will be utilised. There is submission documents that say talk about discussions with bus companies that they could look at after the grant of a consent. But nothing that says a bus company is going to go into a blind turnaround on a hillside, turn their bus around and drive out again, and then go back onto the same route that they already do. So they're going to add time to their bus route and then go back onto the same route that they already do. Because again, the proposal as it stands doesn't provide for that route going through the site and then exiting the existing railway station car park east side. If that makes sense. Sorry, there was another part of the question, Councillor, that you...
Yeah, well, it was just if, I think we sort of balanced that, if it was more affordable housing,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get a feel of your... Sometimes when you say it's almost, there's some objective judgment going on, subjective judgment going on, I'm just trying to get a feel if it's more objective, this is clearly against policy, just to...
Yeah, Tony, can I come here? If I can come in here, Chair.
Of course.
Yeah. Right. Local plan policy is that the starting point is that you should make decisions which are in accordance with the local plan. Okay. You can make decisions which appear to contradict the plan, but you have to have a fully evidenced reason why you would do that. Right. As picked up in the presentation, and you can tell by the reference number on this application has been with us for an extended period. It is, because it is a highly unusual application. And to be perfectly clear about what you're looking at, is that if you are looking for additional housing, you would look near to sustainable transport nodes, which this is. And also there is the offer, as Tony just touched on, which I'll explore a little bit further, is of improving the bus connectivity to the railway station. At the moment, the bus stop is on the main road, and it is not optimal. Okay. The reason why this has taken so long is that we've been working with the applicant to fully explore actually what is going to be realised in terms of benefits here. Okay. And the point that Tony just made is that a bus turning area is proposed. And indeed, as the supporter said, the AONB, now called the National Landscape Area, do have a wide-ranging study talking about modal shift, about getting visitors to use more public transport than just roads. Okay, this is outside that area, but the logic applies still, though. And the issue is, though, and this is the nub here, to attach significant weight to either the car parking or particularly the ability to improve bus transport, it has to be deliverable. And with the bus transport issue, we've worked closely with our strategic transport team, who said that a bus company at the moment will be unlikely to use just an in and out by the same route, because that would add to their route length. What they would want to see is to see a route diversion through the site and out a different direction. So at the moment, one of those reasons why I said you could make a decision which apparently contradicted the local plan would be the delivery of real benefits you want to see. And our issue is here is that we don't actually see that benefit working. And as Tony said, the level of car parking that is provided isn't justified by either really an objective view of the future of the railway station or the amount of the housing that is proposed to justify that car parking. So this is the case of having a compelling argument. Okay. To be absolutely clear, a scheme on this site could potentially have merit, but I would suggest that the way of doing that, because there could be, I know what the applicant said about there being no other options in the area, but you would take a plan-led approach and you would look to include this site, say potentially, in a review of the local plan or the neighbourhood plan, where you could take a strategic view of it, as you would do growth elsewhere in the county. Okay. So the point is I'm trying to make is that, yes, you can make decisions which apparently contradict the local plan, but you have to fully justify why you are making that decision. And Tony's done a lot of work on this, and it is that we do not have the evidential base at the moment to justify going away from that starting point, which is the local plan. Because remember, the local plan, it's not that we are just hitting the housing targets. We purposefully put in that our housing target is 550. We have got an internal target for the local plan of above 800. So we are more than meeting our housing target as we sit here today. So in itself, just the achievement of numbers isn't something which also would enable you to make a decision which apparently contradicted the local plan. And just to make it clear as well, the scheme is delivering a significant number of affordable homes, but that isn't, I think one of the speaker said, that in itself isn't the benefit, because that is the minimum, that's the expectation. That's a policy compliance, not an enhanced offer as such. Okay. So to be clear, you could choose, as you could do with any planning application, to actually saying, we attach huge weight to the potential for moving to more sustainable transport and supporting rail use. My point is, to do that, you would need the evidence to make that decision a reasonable one. Because otherwise, you'd be almost going off, an assumption that this would actually deliver the benefits that you would be attaching the weight to. And And to the Chair, I must apologise for the length of time this application has taken. It is not in accordance with our normal performance targets, but there's been loads of work taking place on this one, and we do feel we've given the applicant a real open, open playing field to try and make their arguments because of how interesting this scheme is. But weighing up the pros and cons, and as has been said, we do not think there is the evidence there from our evaluation to justify your question about going against the local plan policy. And it is, the local plan was adopted in 2022. We will review it. So there is nothing really there to say, for our perspective, say why we should make an exception here. Sorry, that was a very, very long answer to a very short question. But was that useful? Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace.
Chair, can I ask, I recognise that the local plan determines the settlement limit and this application is out with. The neighbourhood plan does not support this in their settlement limit either. But much has been said about the fact this was submitted in 2018, and I did pick up that nobody had a plan for Lesbury at that time. So, just so I get my head round that, Alnwick District Council had no local plan appertaining to a settlement limit in Lesbury when this application was made.
Yeah, there's a point, Chair. Can I make a very quick point there? How planning works is that you make the decision and you reflect policy at the date you make the decision, not the date you submitted the application. So this application could have been submitted, the day before the local plan was adopted or several years beforehand. When you make the decision, you make it in accordance with both the national policy in force at the time, and that's why I made the point that the current national planning policy framework changes are only consultation versions, okay? So you make it in accordance with the plan as is today. And the settlement boundaries, to be really clear here, because this is an important point, the settlement boundaries have been drawn up with the aim of maintaining the land supply to meet the housing targets that we are working with at the moment. So they've been drawn up to allow for us to see housing growth to achieve our targets up until 2035. The fact we're going to be reviewing the local plan in a couple of years isn't something we can speculate on today, because it could be more restrictive or less restrictive.
Thank you, Chair. So if I may, just a secondary there. So when the application was made, there was no settlement limit in place. And the applicant would be very aware of that and was being speculative, if I may use that word.
We have to look at the work that was taking place at the time. Remember that the local plan didn't appear as though by magic at the date of adoption in 2022. Work was taking place on it in the lead up until that point. And there would have been opportunities at that point to make representation on the local plan to get sites included. Okay. And this site wasn't included. Okay.
Any more questions from the committee members? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Tony, page 25, this GP referral thing. I want to ask if this is on every application, and I'll tell you why. Given what Rob said at the top of the meeting, if there's any controversial applications, certainly around my area, I'll be asking for this to be on the applications. I'll also be asking for everything, the education one, all of it. This is the first time I've seen the GP one, and I presume this is how we work out the health funding contribution. Yeah. That how it works.
Mr. Chairman, yes. The size of the application, I should say that the number of houses that are being proposed will trigger both an NHS response, a consultation response, and an education consultation response. which are broadly similar. They have a formula, a set formula to work through. In this particular instance that you're referring to is the GP one. That's an example of the formula that they refer to as they work out X number of houses, X number of persons, X number of illnesses, whatever that formula refers to. Therefore, we require this number of GPs, this amount of NHS care facility, and so on. But yes.
The reason I mentioned it is because if we have any pressure on more pressure on housing in the southeast, this is going to be one of the principal objections, I would say, because of the infrastructure that we need to cope with any more housing. But I mean, I know it's a general question, but it is in this application.
Yeah, it is. And I would just as an aside say, we are constantly trying to improve the way we work with the various infrastructure providers. And we work for many years, we've done a calculation of this type when we look at school place requirements. What we've been doing over the last couple of years is trying to extend that thinking and apply it to all the providers of social infrastructure, be those, schools, healthcare, primary healthcare facilities, as well as dentists, etc. And the ICB is the Integrated Care Board, which we are partners with.
Yes, from the chair, I would just like to chip in too that I do feel it's interesting and important sometimes to see a little bit of the working behind the formula. Often we just see an amount of money. We don't see how it's been worked out. So I think, from an interest point of view, it's quite good for the planners to see how the figure has been arrived at and the calculations behind it. Thank you. Any more questions? No more questions? Would anyone like to move a proposal on this application, please? Councillor Jeff Reid is moving the recommendation. And is that seconded? Seconded by Councillor Stewart. Who would like to speak to the application? Jeff Reid.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I was just
He's not going to sum up, he's just speaking as the proposer.
Well, if no one else wants to do it, then let's
Is it all
just
right
cut to
if
the
he
chase.
speaks now as the proposer? Or?
I would ask the committee again if there's anybody else wants to.
Oh, well, I'm sure there's other people that want to speak, but he could have spoken when he proposed it.
Yeah.
No?
Okay. If nobody else wants to.
Hey, whatever you
Well,
like.
I think other people will want to speak. Do other members of the committee want to speak? I will say a few words, thank you, Councillor, but yeah, if anybody else wants to speak, I'm
Speak
advising.
now or Pharaoh hold your peace.
Yes, speak before Councillor Reid. Yes.
It's quite clear, it's evident from the officer's report and the feelings locally, and it's a long history behind it, and I totally agree with the recommendation which Councillor Reid's put forward.
Thank you.
And
And
Chair, sorry, I hate to be pedantic. Well, I don't actually hate to be pedantic.
you like to be
I like to be pedantic. The existence in itself of local opposition isn't the material consideration. It is the issues that are raised. So if one person raised the concerns and objections, that is as significant as if 100 people did. The Planning Inspectorate regularly include messages that making refusals purely on the basis of local opposition is unsound. So it is the issues that is important.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have a minute to just make sure we are clear about that. Thanks.
Of course. Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. For me, I think the length of time, this is, 5-6 years now, the fact that it's resulted in a refusal is a red flag in itself, I would say. The fact that it's outside the settlement boundary, why have a neighbourhood plan if you're not going to recognise it and enforce it? And then this strange thing where we can't extend the car park unless we get 60 houses. That's just ridiculous. You know, NCC could go and put extension on that car park, surely. It doesn't take 60 houses to do it. So, strange arguments, and I'll certainly be voting for a refusal. Thank you.
Anyone else? No, well, before Councillor Reid speaks, I just wanted to say one word, Councillor Reid. As chair, I think it has been important to listen to the residents and the parish council through our planning consultant, Jenny Ludman. But as also has been said, this is a strategic application. And as chair planning, you know, I was hoping that a more positive and larger integrated transport hub might come forward with this application. And I don't think this has materialised. And as our Director of Planning has said, we haven't got an evidence base to support such an application. So I, on this occasion too, am content and happy to go along with the refusal. Councillor Reid.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not very often that I actually read these things and absorb all of the information that's in there so easily. So thanks for a well-written report. That's why I didn't have any questions, because all the questions I had were either answered by the people that spoke, or the officers, and the exchange that Councillor Hill had. So I'm quite happy to have proposed it, because I think it's the right thing. I think that the officers have made the right decision, and you know, let's go to the vote, and so everybody can go and have the tea.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, Councillor Reid has moved approval of the refusal, and that has been seconded by Councillor Stewart. All those in favour of that application? To refuse.
That's 12, Chair.
Any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you.
Against. No, you're against. Sorry.
Abstention, was it? Abstain, yeah.
No, none against.
No against. So that application is refused. Thank you, members of the committee. Yeah. Could someone get Councillor Swinbank? Is he coming back?
We've just gone together.
Quite well.
Yeah, it did.
Good planning.
Yeah, well, yeah. The thing is, we get every opportunity to make those case.
Yeah.
Because it was a huge opportunity to do what you're saying, create a sustainable transport.
Transport hub. Yeah, and that just wasn't there, was it? Yeah. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on to our second application this afternoon. It's a Reserve Matters application for the site at Northgate Hospital, Northgate Morpeth. It's Reserve Matters for access, appearance, landscape, layout and scale, and all relevant information relating to conditions 1, 2, 8, 9, 25, 26 and 36. And Tamsin Wood isn't here this afternoon, but we're in the capable hands of Judith, so she is going to take us through this application. Judith Murphy, over to you.
So,
couple of updates before going to the presentation. An addendum report was sent around to everybody yesterday, so I hope you've all received that and had a flick through it. Since the report was compiled, there have been some more submitted amended plans from the applicants for our lead local flood authority, county colleges and highways authority to consider. They've now done that and they haven't raised any objections, and they have added some additional conditions. So that's what's in your addendum report. Excuse me. There is also, because of the amended plans we've received, condition number 1 in your main report has altered slightly to incorporate the amended plan numbers. So there's a revised condition number 1 also in your addendum report, and a further additional condition to be added as well. Because of the changes, that's prompted a revised recommendation, which I'll just read to you now, which is different to what's in your main report, but it is in your addendum, but I'll just read that out. So the revised recommendation is that the application be granted permission subject to the completion of a deed of variation to the section 106 secured under application 19/04025/FUL to cover the increase in contributions required for healthcare, now 112,800, and education facilities now 974,154, and change in amount from 23 to 25 dwellings. And types of affordable dwellings to include rent to buy and subject to the conditions listed in the committee report and those listed in the addendum report. Okay, so I'll go on to the presentation now, Chair.
Thank you.
So this application is the Reserved Matters application for access, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale, including all relevant information relating conditions 1, which is reserved matters, 2, reserved matters, 8, landscaping, 9, play area, 25, boundary treatment, 26, car parking, and 36, details of bus stop pursuant to planning permission, 19/04025/FUL. So this is a location plan of the site. It's just to remind members as well that this is a reserved matters application. So it's not to revisit what was approved in the outline application way back when that was considered. So we're just looking at everything within the red line at the moment. So that's the northern part of the site, and this is what we're calling the southern part of the site. So the application relates to a hybrid planning application that was presented to committee and granted planning permission on the 21st of April 2020. Under that application, full approval was given for the demolition of hospital buildings at Northgate and the development of a secure inpatient unit and ancillary facilities, other refurbishment works to buildings, new parking layouts and landscape works. Under that application, outline permission was also granted for residential development within the grounds of Northgate Hospital, with all matters reserved, which is what we're looking at now. So, the slide shows that the location of the site outlined in red, as shown here, and as I've just explained, it is split into 2 areas. The plan shows that the sites lie next to Northgate Hospital, which is located 2 miles north of Morpeth. Overall, the site is bound by farmland to the north, south and east, and by housing developments and the A1 immediately to the west. Across the A1 to the west lies a small residential community of Fairmoor. With regards to the site's immediate location, the northern residential development area here is bounded to the north by hedgerow and mature tree line with agricultural land beyond. To the east by woodland alongside Shield Hill Burn and agricultural land beyond. To the south by the Northgate Hospital site, and to the west by housing developments including St Andrew's Gardens by Taylor Wimpey, A1 and beyond, and Westview. The southern residential parcel is bounded to the north and west by housing developments including St Andrew's Gardens by Taylor Wimpey, A1 beyond to the west, and to the east by the Northgate Hospital site, and to the south by the recently built houses along Marigold Way, at the Persimmon development, the Cottingburn, with the Morpeth Northern Bypass beyond. So this plan shows the buildings that are or were on the site. It isn't crystal clear, but hopefully you can get the gist of those there. Some have been removed already and some are still in place. All the buildings on both sites have permission to be removed under the outline permission, other than the water tower on the northern site, which is to remain. These next few slides just show some images of the sites and the buildings that will be or have been removed already. So these ones are the northern site, and that's the water tower in the background there, which sits around about here on the site. That's just some more of the buildings to be demolished on the southern site. Stores, meeting rooms, cafe and shop buildings to be demolished on the proposed residential site. And that's a head injuries building to be demolished. Woodwork, sports hall, lounge building to be demolished. Building 14 to be demolished on proposed residential site. And this building also to be demolished. Okay. Sorry, I think I've just missed a slide there. So this slide shows the proposed layout of both sites together. In terms of layout, it shows that whilst both the northern and southern areas are two distinguished and separate parcels of land, both would be accessed from the west of the site by the existing public adopted highway, main road that leads into the Northgate Hospital site. The dwellings would then be accessed via the new estate roads and a series of primary and secondary routes. They would have frontages facing the routes throughout the development. Each property would have its own rear garden area and some front gardens, and each would have their own garage and or drive for parking. The layout also shows that landscaping is proposed within the site, which will include tree planting throughout the open areas of public space to the north and south would be provided. To the north, mainly around the water tower, which is to be retained, and to the south, mainly around the site of the proposed play area. Landscaping is also proposed throughout the development within the curtilages of the dwellings and the open spaces, around which will include maintaining existing and creating new areas of grassland, new hedges, native shrub planting and wildflower meadow. The SUDs will also be developed to have a multifunction through the provision of wetland wildflower seeding, which will help biodiversity. With regard to existing natural features on the site, there are groups of trees and woodland within and next to the site. The construction of the proposed layout will necessitate the removal of 61 individually surveyed trees, 15 entire groups of trees and sections of 8 other groups. These include trees classified as categories A, B and C. It is considered necessary to make this amount of tree removal acceptable to add a condition which will ensure that every single tree that is to be removed will be replaced on site and will be of the same species and category, and in turn will help to limit any impact of their loss in both visual and biodiversity terms. I think that condition is covered in your addendum report. The privacy distances have also been measured between every house within the new estate and between new and existing houses to the edge of the site. Any revisions to the layout now ensure adequate privacy distances are achieved, which would ensure no loss of privacy to future and existing residents. These distances would also ensure no dwelling is impacted upon from loss of outlook or overbearing impact. So these next two slides show the layout of each site in greater detail with aerial view next to them to help provide context of what is around the site. This slide shows the northern site. As you can see, the water tower will be retained, which is up here, to the north in an attractive setting of open space. The trees retained around it and the SUDs will be located to the south with an enclosed pumping station. So this is the SUDs and this is the pumping station. This shows the proposed layout of the southern site, which really mainly follows a linear format in a northwesterly, southeasterly direction. So again, the SUDS pond is located to the south, and this will be next to houses on the existing Persimmon site. The play area and substation are both to the northern end, so that is up this side, this end of the site. This slide shows a collection of some front elevations of the proposed dwellings, which will be 2 stories in height. 15 house types are proposed, consisting of detached, terrace and semi-detached properties with different features. It is considered that the design of these are all acceptable, and the mix and design will also help to create a diverse and interesting streetscape that adds interest and character to the street scenes. The scale of these, being 2 stories in height, is also similar to existing properties in the vicinity. So these final few slides are just showing around the site, really. So these are the photos of the road leading into the site. Yeah, these are taken just from around the northern side of the site, and again the water tower featuring there, which as you know will be staying put. Northern site again, and these are some of the southern site. So that's the final slide again, just proposed site overview in an aerial photo. So really just to conclude the presentation, it's also to make you aware, as set out in the committee report, there's part of this application a deed of variation to the original section 106 still needs to be drawn up. That's happening now and is with our legal and is almost complete. This is because the layout proposes 7 more dwellings than originally considered at outline. The deed of variation is to cover the increase in contributions required for both education and healthcare facilities and the need for 1 more affordable dwelling, although the applicant is providing another additional affordable dwelling, so 25 as opposed to the 23 originally proposed. The committee report also sets out the final mix and tenure of affordable housing, which has been agreed between the applicant and NCC Housing, which now includes a rent-to-buy option as a home ownership product. The committee report also summarises the objections to the proposal and addresses these objections, which were mainly highway related under the highways section, another section at the end of the report. It does set out the issues, but they've now been addressed, which is covered in your addendum. Also detailed on your addendum report, and just to recap, there is a revised recommendation, which is to grant planning permission, subject to the completion of the deed of variation to the section 106 secured under application 19/04025/FUL to cover the increase in contributions required for healthcare, now 112,800, and education facilities, now 974,154, and change in amount of the affordable units from 23 to 25 and types of affordable dwellings to include the rent to buy, and subject to the conditions listed in your committee report and those in the addendum report. So that's the recommendation is to approve subject to what I've just read out. There is one other ask of members, and that is to, if you would be able to grant some delegated authority to officers in conjunction with the Director of Planning and Housing and the Chair of the Committee, just to address any minor discrepancies or anomalies that appear in the conditions as we work our way through, just getting the decision notice ready should members be minded to approve the application. We have had some really quick turnarounds of plans over the last couple of weeks, and while we're certain we are there, it's just in case anything does come up that we just need to tweak. So if members were, it wouldn't change anything on the objectives, it wouldn't add anything new. But if members would be willing to grant delegated authority to allow officers to do that, that would help us just speed the process up slightly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Judith. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, we now come to the slot for public speaking. We only have 1 public speaker on this application this afternoon. Phil Jones speaking in support of the application. Mr. Jones, you have 5 minutes, sir.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Phil Jones and I'm Head of Land and Partnerships at Lovell Partnerships. I'm delighted to be with you this afternoon and have the opportunity to discuss our development proposals at Northgate, which are aligned to the outline planning permission which you have already granted and approved. Your officer's report is comprehensive, balanced and rightly recommends approval. The proposed development has been given a clean bill of health by your expert officers and by statutory organisations with no objections. Your officers have been extremely positive, pragmatic throughout the process of considering our proposals, which are presented to you this afternoon. The rigorous professionalism shown by your officers in assessing our application has ensured that we have arrived at the very best possible scheme and have developed a well-considered and sympathetic proposal providing 141 new homes of a mix, type, size and tenure. Houses are needed for young people and families who are currently living in houses that are either too small for them, in rented accommodation that is overpriced, sharing with friends, or still living at home with their parents. Our scheme will ensure that the current and future generations have the opportunity and the right to own a home that meets their own needs and aspirations. This scheme is genuinely sustainable, well planned, and will result in benefits for both new and existing residents. This scheme enables the council to deliver housing on a site that has been recognised as a suitable location for additional much-needed new homes within the county. Our proposals will provide over and above the required affordable family housing, as set out in the outline planning permission. All affordable housing is to be provided on-site, and the type and mix is fully aligned to the council's adopted development plan and housing strategy, securing affordable properties for local people in need of support to get onto the housing ladder. The affordable homes are to be delivered by the local registered provider, Castles and Coasts, who we have a contractual arrangement with. Our proposals have been fully endorsed by the council's affordable housing team with no objections. The proposed development has been given a clean bill of health by your expert officers and statutory organisations, where the technical aspects of the development have been vigorously examined and assessed. Through engaging positively with the council, working in collaboration with the NHS Trust in advance of submitting our Reserve Matters application, this is a unique opportunity to work in partnership with a not-for-profit or public organisation. We have responded proactively to all the comments and observations during the consultation process, which has enabled us to review our proposals to ensure that we have presented the best possible scheme in terms of the design. As outlined by your officer's report, our proposals will ensure integration with the existing built and natural environment and is designed appropriately. The overall design, appearance, layout, landscaping, impact on trees and the consideration of residential amenity of existing neighbours of the proposed development is in full accordance with the local plan policies and the National Planning Policy Framework, and as such supports the delivery of the Council's current housing requirement. We are delighted that we have the Council's Conservation Officer's support with the retention of the water tower. We see this building within our proposals being a unique opportunity in terms of providing a focal point and a link in terms of recognition of the past while the place evolves and grows over time. We believe this will play an important role in the positive marketing of the development and the area. In terms of site highways and access, this has been fully accepted by the Council's Highways Officer. The bus stop, the internal highway layout, parking provisions, footpaths and traffic calming have all been considered by your Highways Officer, and I'm delighted all are acceptable with no objections. We are sympathetic and appreciate the comments provided by the existing residents in relation to the highways. However, as your officer has just outlined in the committee report, the comments associated with maintenance, off-site highways impacts and accessibility via sustainable modes were considered and assessed at outline planning stage, and as such are not for consideration under this Reserve Matters application. Sustainability is a core value for Lovell Homes, and this is mirrored through this scheme with sustainability lying at the heart of our proposals. The application is underpinned by strong design principles, ensuring delivery of high quality development. This is demonstrated through our commitment with the homes orientated to utilise solar gain in winter and limit overheating risks in the summer, reducing energy consumption. Glazing to the principal living areas of each home to reduce the need for artificial lighting. Each new home to be provided with an electric vehicle charging point. Implementation of techniques to reduce water consumption and the use of permeable paving across the development to facilitate natural filtration, prevent water pollution, reduce the heat island effect, and using natural and sustainable materials. It is demonstrably clear from the suite of documentation. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Planning Committee, have you got any questions you'd like to put to our planning officers this afternoon? Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, I do, Chair, and I'm sorry after good presentations all round. My questions on nothing that's been said to date, so I apologise for that. As a former parish councillor, I found this an incredible condition within this application, that the play equipment shall be maintained and kept in good working order, and any defective parts shall be replaced immediately through the life of the development. Now, I see that as saving a parish council tens of thousands of pounds. But can I ask, when you say throughout the life of the development, does that mean forever or until the last property is built? Which will make a difference in the thousands.
Yeah, Chair, it's forever. It's for as long as it's there.
Thank you, Chair. I really welcome that reply when Malcolm mentioned before about how you go about getting figures. I think we will remember this condition with future applications. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hutchinson.
I had a very similar question. I've got it marked on condition 5. It says shall be maintained, but it doesn't say by whom, whether it's the developer, whoever. So in that condition, I'd like to see who it's maintained by, because I've spent many thousands on play equipment through my capital schemes allowance. It costs a lot of money, but it's just been said, it costs a lot of money to maintain. It's got to be inspected properly and maintained to a high quality, proper standard. So I'd like to see a name of who inspects it, who looks after it, who pays for it all. Thank you.
Chair, I don't know, I don't have the name, but it will be like a management company will do that. I don't know who they've employed to do that at the moment, but that's the way it normally works. It would be a management company who will take on the contract.
That's great. As long as we can see that on the condition, I'd be very happy.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Hill.
Thank you. It was just seeking confirmation and assurance that the objections seem to be predominantly around road and highway safety issues. It's a constant theme. What assurance can you give us that this has been discharged?
Can I just say that they were all dealt with at the outline stage? All those highways issues were dealt with at the outline stage. But I would like Matthew just to reconfirm that he is happy with the highways issues.
Yeah,
obviously, we're not talking about them today.
I mean, the outline is the general principle. I mean, this should be the details. So it's just
well,
that
it was the detail right at the beginning. Yeah. When this application first came to us, it was that highways access that was important, and that was where Matthew and his team fed in their information. So, Matthew, can you tell us a little bit about your examination of these highways issues right at the beginning?
Yeah, so when we get an outline application, effectively the impact on the highway is the same whether we've got detail or it's just a red line. So therefore, when you get an outline application, we assess the impacts beyond the site. It's only when you have matters that are related to the reserve matters that, in terms of the layout that's been submitted for this application, do we then start looking at the internal layout. But if you like, the impacts outside the red line are all determined at the outline stage.
So, you know, can I take up Councillor Hill's point and just say, you know, there's mention there of an acute S-bend and access off the roundabout. You're happy and content with all those issues. You felt that we really explored those at the beginning.
At the outline stage, they were all considered in terms of the means of access to the site and the impact of additional vehicles. Yes, there's 7 extra dwellings compared to what was originally assessed. However, that's 4 or 5 extra trips in the peak hour, so that's not a material change to the impacts. If, for example, an application to come in reserve matters for 200 units, then that does have a material change of what effects there are, but because it's so close to what was assessed at the outline.
So to clarify, there's been an assessment and don't think it's on...
The transport assessment was submitted.
There hasn't been mitigation or anything?
Yes, so there's mitigation in terms of providing improved sustainable transport link from the Northern bypass, so to upgrade the existing footway effectively from the jet garage up into the site to connect with what's been put in as part of the Taylor Wimpey scheme. So there'll be effectively a cyclist and improved pedestrian connection down to the Morpeth bypass to connect with what was put in as part of that scheme. But that was secured with the outline, which is why you don't see it on our response to reserve matters.
Are you happy, Councillor Hill? Sort of. You're never happy.
When they all say, told you it was an accident waiting to happen, and yes. I asked it and you brushed it.
Well, indeed. Good for you for raising it. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Just to preface my questions, again, we're going to see a sports hall demolished. If you can do it piecemeal and deliver it to Bedlington, we'll have it. getting back to the dwellings, the types, and I've asked you about this before, Rob, the affordable dwellings and the types of them. It was specifically the Berwick one. There seems to be a hell of a disconnect between what the developer wants to build, which I presume he's looked at market forces, and I presume he's assessed what he needs to build to sell, and what we've asked for in affordable dwellings. You know, they want to build 79 four-bedroom dwellings, and we're asking for 2. So, my question is, the affordable dwellings we're asking for, are they assessed on need or some other assessment? And an ancillary question, on number 9, page 73, 20% of new open market dwellings and 50% of affordable dwellings shall meet or exceed the enhanced accessibility and adaptability housing standards. Great. I presume that's a build code.
The what, sorry?
The build code?
Yeah, what it... Can I answer this one, Chair?
Yes, sir.
What it is, there's a local plan policy which requires a minimum percentage of accessible properties. What that means is that properties need to be accessible at level and with a doorway wide enough for, say, to take a wheelchair, things like that. In terms of your first question, yeah, there's often a difference between what I would call a market assessment of what a developer would want to sell into the market and between what we look at from an affordable housing needs assessment. And so we do, which we look at what evidence we've got about what the actual demand is for affordable housing in an area, and that gives you both your size mix, and it also gives you a suggested tenure mix as well in terms of the mix, you know, between affordable and affordable rent, etc. We have a team who look at this, who work across both planning and the housing department, and so we seek to like dovetail into what evidence we have at the moment, and we always do that on housing schemes. It can't be a perfect science, but we look at what evidence we've got in terms of housing needs assessments and things like what Home Finder data tells us about what the pressures in the area is for affordable properties.
Well, it just seems we're allowing the executive houses to be built, and we're trying to catch up with the social rented ones, if you like.
Through the chair, I think this is a good question. But remember, we have a need for housing of all types, and market housing tends to be informed by what I would call express demand. And express demand is price signals in the market. In other words, what sells best at the moment. When we look at affordable housing mix, we look at what I might call latent demand. That's, in other words, not demand which is expressed through price in the market, but through us actually looking at what the community needs. And there are two different things. And we have to say that all sectors of housing is important. Because remember, if we are being successful in growing our economy, we also have a need for upsizing houses as well as downsizing and affordable ones. Yeah. And I think it's clear that many employers in the area will argue on both fronts and say that major employers want both housing for affordable for their workforce, and they want to be able to attract to the area, you know, the higher paid staff, and we need a housing offer to meet that as well. So that's why we use a mixed economy view of planning for housing.
With relevance to my second question there, that exceed and enhance accessibility and adaptability housing, I was saying that because we're asking for 50% of the affordable ones to be accessible, etc., then I just don't understand why we aren't asking for more of the market dwellings to be more accessible. I was saying we're catering for accessibility better than the open market.
Yeah. I think it's important to notice that this scheme exceeds the private sector requirement for accessible housing as well, because the local plan policy is exceeded by this. And that local plan policy, the percentage that we got through was the highest we could get through at that time because of the viability issue. and that went through the government inspector. But we do use the opportunity wherever possible to exceed that. And so this scheme is a good example of a modern residential design which addresses not just one policy in the local plan, but a range of policies there. And all schemes are, you know, a balancing act. But this, as is clear in the report, does represent what we'd call good contemporary design, and it's a step forward to perhaps what we've been used to seeing delivered, say, 10 years ago.
Any more questions, ladies and gentlemen? Oh yes, Martin Swin.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask, with regard to the biodiversity value of the trees on the site. I see there are 61, I think, trees to be removed. I was just having a look through the tree report, and they seem to be sort of 20 to 60, 70 years in age, those trees. And in condition 7, page 72, I see that each tree that will be removed will be replaced with a sort of 5-year-old tree of the same species and looked after for 3 years, which is all very good. Now, some of those trees might die, but the main question that people would ask, I think, at this point is you remove a 50-year-old tree and you replace it with a 5-year-old tree. There's a great kind of temporal problem there in terms of the biodiversity that the new tree that replaces the old tree. For simple terms, you know, a bird is going to struggle to nest in a 5-year-old tree compared to a 50-year-old tree. So the question I'm asking really, is that taken into account? Because we're just going for one for one.
I can tell you coming from now, yeah. So I'll get up to this. In addition to the by the numbers exercise that takes place here, and in addition to the debates over things like biodiversity net gain, we also do an ecological impact assessment, which picks up issues like that. So the end product that we see with all its provisions and conditions is not meant to result in any biodiversity loss. And I think it's also important to recognise that actually planting new trees is more effective for carbon capture as well. So all those things need to be put into the mix. So just to be clear, we do use ecological impact assessment as well as the tools to us. That looks at it in the round, okay, which includes numbers and species mix and planting age. Because an alternative would be, in the past, they've all been replaced with whips, which are usually, you know, your 1 foot high version. So we've looked at this, and the site is best served by using this species and age mix.
Happy? You've got another question,
I do have another question. Yeah, it is sometimes the case that standard trees don't actually do as well as smaller trees.
Yeah, and that's the balance.
Yeah. The other question I had is with regard to the water tower. This looks something like something we had where I grew up, which was demolished maybe 40 years ago. The question, though, is how is the upkeep of that water tower going to be paid for in the future? Because it's presumably going to be there forever, effectively.
No.
Yes, sorry?
This is going to stay and will continue whatever the upkeep is now.
Yeah. We'll double check this. There is an overall schedule of various maintenance agreements which have been mentioned. I think Council was. We'll just double check this. What we'll do is before we issue the decision, we'll just make sure it is covered by some form of provision. I know I can just add at this point, I know that artefacts like water towers are regularly demolished, and particularly in the 70s it was a case of clear away. Another reason why this scheme represents a good contemporary take on design is actually reflecting, you know, the character of the area, and it is a landmark, and rather than just lose it for sake of an extra plot or two, it's been retained. And it's a bit like the issue we explored when we looked at the other scheme in Morpeth, at the old hospital site, where we've retained structures there because they had a real, local character which was valued. So this is another example of that. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not averse to keeping it. I'm just concerned that obviously nobody's going to live in it, so nobody's going to potentially be maintaining it. That's the question.
They do make nice conversions, though, I can say. Yeah.
Interesting living in a water tower, eh? Yeah. Any more questions, ladies and gentlemen? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thanks, Chair. That's kind of just rumbling through my mind, and you probably won't be able to answer this, so I'm quite content for you just to absorb the question. Presumably, the play equipment and the water tower are going to be paid for by charging the residents the management fee, which is the thing these days, isn't it? Suds, ponds and all the rest of these things that we build on, that get built on other estates. There is a management company that all the residents pay into. You know, it's like paying double council tax, I suppose, really. But that's, I would imagine, that's how all these things are going to be paid for. The people who live in the houses are going to they will own the management company, but the management company itself will have its hands tied by the people that produce cut the grass and maintain the maintain the play park and maintain the water tower. I might be completely wrong. You might want to comment on that. You might not want to comment on that. But the question is, do we know whether this is going to be run by a management company that will ultimately be owned by the people who own the houses?
That is the normal approach now, and there's either an approach where we negotiate with the developer and we take on board, you know, highways, adoptions, whatever, and then there's a process to go through for that, or other assets are retained in terms of a management company on site, and how that works normally. And you've outlined it effectively, that the initial few years are run by a default company set up by the developer, and then it's up for the residents group to decide on who does that and how it's funded. Okay. It's an awkward question, Councillor Reid, but I think no, I'm not saying it's not. I'm sorry, I phrased that wrongly. It's not an awkward question. It's the fact that otherwise we are perpetually into the stage where we're trying to find budget to maintain these, and I'm sure we're all aware of lots of very poorly maintained children's play areas up and down the country, whereas this is a not without its downsides, but it's a way of having a consistently maintained and good quality facility.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got no real desire to turn this into a conversation, but is there some way that we can prevent the management company in 10 years' time saying, you know, all the residents own the management company because all the properties have been sold, well, so the developer's gone, and the management company decide that they can't afford the £40,000 it's going to cost to put the water tower in a condition that it's not going to fall over.
No.
So is there some condition that we can put on that says, regardless of how much it's going to cost, whoever is responsible for looking after the tower now, has to maintain that in perpetuity, just the same as because the cost of maintaining these structures accelerates away.
Yeah, and there are definitely two answers to that question, in that we cannot control that in perpetuity by a planning condition, but what we will be requiring is the management scheme that we agree and the terms of that to reflect the retention of the water tower in perpetuity. So we'll be controlling the requirement to have the management agreement, but we cannot dictate the management agreement moving forward into time, because it may come a time, I think we need to be honest, and in say 50 years' time, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that it may be beyond saving if it's got, say, structural steel in it. But that would need to be on an evidence basis, so we can make sure that the provision is to, you know, maintain it for as long as, you know, practically possible.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson, another question?
Just to add into that, I'm part of one of the developments we passed, I live on, and we've got this management thing. The developer actually manages the management company. We just pay into it. And I'm fighting now, before we take the stuff over, to have it in a decent condition. Because 2.5 years into the build, a lot of, you know, there's block paving broken, there's edges broken. So that's the thing to be wary of. But my question's about the trees. Is there any change in the trees identified to be retained and protected from the original application? Is there any change in the numbers? Is there any change in the trees?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think...
That's fine.
I don't know for certain, but I'm not... I mean, the reports don't talk about that. I don't think there is any change.
Well,
I think that it's just been further addressed through what the information that's come in on the lead up to the reserve matters and through these conditions and the addendum conditions, but I don't think there's any significant changes.
I like that condition 7. I think it's well worded and clear, exactly what we want. The only thing I would say is put them in site appropriate places. If you're going to if they're going to fell a huge tree, don't put it next to houses, because you know that's the problems we're probably all having at the moment. But if there was a change in the trees, I would expect to have seen it in this report. That's all.
Thank you. Councillor Hutchinson.
I'm sorry to drag this out, but this maintenance thing, you're saying in perpetuity, is that in planning perpetuity being 80 years, or perpetuity, as I call it, forever and ever?
Yeah, it's right. We have to look at both the design life of the estate and what is reasonable to control. It's, for the sake of argument, a plain English term of it shall be maintained until further notice. And that's the better way of looking at it, because things change over time. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions? No. Could I ask for a recommendation? Councillor Hutchinson.
Could I propose the officer's recommendation with any amendments to conditions regarding maintenance, etc., to be sorted by the Director of Planning and yourself? Otherwise, as is the recommendation.
Can I just clarify that?
Councillor Darwin, you're seconding?
Yes, I second that,
We'll
Chair.
read it by number for the minutes. Which conditions?
Condition number 5, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was 5.
Yeah, I think it was condition number 5. About the play equipment, you wanted to know who the management company would be?
What the arrangements for?
I would prefer...
clarify the wording.
Yeah, you know, we had some name there, some management companies, so we had somebody to go back to say it needs fixing, or you fix it, we're not fixing it.
Okay.
Or the management, the house owners don't fix it.
Yeah.
Or the parish.
You'll double check it. And if it's deemed to be robust enough in its current wording with the background information, I'll discuss with the Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Hutton, can I just clarify that's also with the conditions in your report and your amended conditions in your addendum report?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Councillor Darwin's happy to go along with that.
Yeah.
Any debate this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen? Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, just very briefly, because I really think everything's been covered. I mentioned before about a good presentation and an excellently written document as well, made it easy to understand. But I did a Jeff Reed and I read everything. And I would like to comment in particular how I can see a change in the conditions, and it shows a team working together, looking at the future and not just at the present. For example, if I may highlight, Chair, notwithstanding the provisions, blah, 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 condition number 4, garages shall not be converted to living space. It's taken into account the number of vehicles that will be in that area and the lack of space, because let's be honest, it's the best storage space we have in a home, a garage. It stores everything but a car. So what you're doing here is making that condition, and I'm seeing it more and more where the garage is turned into a home. But the one I really like is number 3, Chair. No building waste left under any areas. You move into a new home and you start doing your garden, because please don't think when you go into a new home the garden's done for you and it looks beautiful. It's not. But what I do know is it'll cost me money to take it to a recycling centre. And that's something we're saying to the purchaser, this won't happen because the developer is responsible for getting rid of that waste. So I really like those conditions, and of course number 5 just made my night, to be honest with you, Chair. So I'd like to compliment the team who look at these conditions. Thank you.
Yes, well, I too like that condition about getting rid of building waste. I had a slight gathering at the weekend, one of the new developments in Long Framlington, and I was saying to the gentleman, how were you getting on in your garden? And he said, you know, I could make a fortune from the scrap merchant from what I've taken out of my garden. So I'm right with you too, Councillor Wallace. We need to be more careful about that. So, any more relevant comment to this application? No? Well, it's been moved and seconded. Would you like to sum up, Councillor Hutchinson?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think it's been very well debated. I'm pleased that condition 5, which I had marked from the very start, came up, and I think that's been very well debated. So no, I've nothing more to say, really. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All those members in favour of Councillor Hutchinson's motion to approve? Thank you. So no abstentions, no people against. Well, that's our 2 major applications dealt with. We've got under item 7 some planning appeals for members' information. Under item 8 we've got section 106 updates. And the Chair has no urgent business this afternoon. So I would just like to thank you very much for coming along today and your contributions and your decisions. Thank you, Planning Committee. Thank you. Thank the officers too.